Can you guys hear me? Well, welcome to Deep Dive with the Data Migration Tools and Azure Database Migration Service. And before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Raj Pochiraju, Principal Engineering Architect in the Azure Data Group. And I have my lead engineer, Carol, who is going to help me answer some of the questions if you really stump me with the deep technical question. So my team's primary focus is to build the database migration tools and services that really help you to provide a seamless database migration experience from your on-premises databases to Azure. And as part of that, today what we're going to be doing is I'm briefly going to talk about various phases in the migration journey, and then I'm going to introduce the specific tools and services Microsoft built that will really take you through that migration journey. And more importantly, we are going to be doing very deep demos to showcase the end-to-end migration experience. So I don't have too many slides just to set expectations. I got only like 4 to 5 slides, and rest of the presentation is going to be fully demos by taking an application as an example. So I'm going to showcase how to migrate that specific application database to Azure, and then how to migrate that application itself to Azure, and then switch the connection string, and how easy it is to do that kind of a migration that I'm going to showcase through my tools and services. As a matter of fact, to that extent, if you look at the migration journey, right, there are 3 major phases: pre-migration, migration, and post-migration. In the pre-migration stage is the most important stage, where you really want to discover all your environment and make an inventory of your servers, databases, applications, find out the application dependencies, what are these applications can be migrated to the cloud, which applications have dependencies with what applications, right? You need to make all this kind of analysis, and you also want to understand what specific target platforms that you can easily migrate with less effort, but at the same time maximize your cost savings. And then you also want to understand what specific size on the Azure that you really want to provision to make sure that your applications function as expected. So all this analysis happens during the assessment, and especially in the case of databases, you want to understand, are there any breaking changes that you really need to address after the migration is done? Any objects that use legacy syntax that you need to address? Are there any migration blockers that you need to worry about it? All that analysis happens in the pre-migration stage. And in the migration stage, that's the time that you will migrate your data and you migrate your schema, of course, schema first and then the data at later. And then you also want to migrate any other artifacts that your applications are dependent on. For example, in the case of SQL Server, you have SQL Server agent jobs, SSIS packages, logins. You want to migrate all of those as well. And then once the migration is done, you do some kind of a smoke test, validation test to make sure that the application is functioning well. Apply any of the mitigations that the assessment tool really recommended you to apply those mitigations, make sure that you test your applications, and then release your applications for the business. So that's kind of a briefly the various stages that you have in the migration journey. And given that, what I'm going to be doing today is that I'm going to give an end-to-end migration journey using our tools and services that takes you through these 3 different phases that I just talked about. As you see here, my on-premises application, which is running on a Windows server, which is a ASP.NET application, and then the database is running on an on-premises SQL Server. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be assessing the databases, assessing the application to make sure that how ready the databases or the application ready to migrate to Azure, and I'm going to use the App Service Migration Assistant tool to migrate my app to the web app services which is running on the Azure, and then I'm going to use Azure Database Migration Service to migrate my database to Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. And then I'm going to, once these 2 are migrated, I'm going to change the connection string, and then I'm going to bring the target application online, which is going to be running in the cloud, right? That's kind of an expectation that we have today. And then before I go to the tools demo, let me explain the specific tools and services that my team build that really help you to take this journey. On the left side, you see all the specific sources that we support, and then on the right side, you see the specific targets that we support. When it comes to the sources, we support starting from SQL Server 2005 all the way up to 2017 that you can really migrate to Azure SQL Database, single database, Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, or SQL servers which are running on the VMs, right? Those are the specific targets when it comes to the SQL Server. We also support migrating from heterogeneous sources like Oracle, Sybase, DB2 to the SQL on the SQL targets on the Azure. We also have a support for open sources, MySQL and PostgreSQL, that you can do a lift and shift migration to Azure Database for MySQL and Postgres respectively. We also have support for NoSQL databases like MongoDB to Cosmos DB. And then not only that we really support migrating from your on-premises environment, but we also support migrating from other clouds like AWS. If you're running your databases on either EC2 or RDS, we have an ability that we provided that you can migrate to Azure. Same thing with Google Cloud as well. And when it comes to the assessments, we have a bunch of tools that really help you. The Azure Migrate service is a fully managed service on the Azure, which really help you to discover your environment, find out the app dependencies, all that analysis that you can do with Azure Migrate Hub, Azure Migrate. And then when it comes to the database assessments, particularly with SQL servers, which is my example here, you are going to use the tool called Data Migration Assistant tool. That tool really helps you to assess your databases and tell you how ready your databases are migrating to Azure, what are the migration blockers, what are the breaking changes, and it also provides you a mitigative plan. And then when it comes to SQL, the heterogeneous sources like Oracle, Sybase, DB2, we use a tool called SQL Server Migration Assistant tool that really help you to assess the heterogeneous data sources and also does the schema conversion for you. So schema conversion is a very important aspect when you are coming from a different set of platforms. So SSMA will really help you to do the schema conversion and also help you to migrate. And we have a tool called Database Experimentation Assistant tool. That tool really help you to assess your or do a performance validation on the target to make sure that the target is really going to respond well for you even before the production migration happens. And then when it comes to the database migrations, we have a service called Azure Database Migration Service, a fully managed service on the Azure, which really help you to migrate your databases at scale to Azure. And then it also provides a near zero downtime migration experience. So we're going to be showcasing that particular service in my demos as well. And this service has been there for last 2 years, and so far we have been able to migrate 200,000+ databases using just this service alone. And then today we are especially releasing a hybrid DMS service. So we have cloud DMS service which has been there for last 2 years, and today we are releasing a Azure Database Migration Service with hybrid mode, and I'll tell you why we need that kind of a hybrid mode service for us, which I'm going to showcase in my demo. Right? Make sense? Okay. Then let me jump onto the demos. So for that, I'm going to switch my screen here, which is 7. Thanks. So as you see here, this is so all my demos I'm going to be taking as an example with an application that I got. This is the Parts Unlimited application, which is currently running on my Windows server with ASP.NET as a platform. And then it is also accessing a SQL Server database, which is really managing the orders for all the parts. Now my goal is to migrate this application and as well as the database to Azure. But at this point, I don't know whether this application is ready to migrate to Azure or not. Even if I know, I don't even know which target that I can migrate to, right? Do I need to migrate my application to a VM itself? Or can I migrate to the Azure Web App Services, which is platform as a service? In terms of the databases, I don't know if my database can be migrated to a Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, SQL DB, or am I going to migrate to a SQL Server which is running on the VM? So I have a bunch of these questions are unanswered at this point, and let's take a tour with my tools to see how my tools are going to help me to answer these questions and perform the migration. Okay? At first, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing the Database Migration Assistant, which really helped me to assess my databases. So at first, I'm going to migrate my databases, and then I'm going to migrate my app, and towards the end, I'm going to change the connection string so that the app newly migrated to Azure will now start connecting to a database which is migrated to Azure. That way, we'll end the whole story. Make sense? So at this point, I really need to migrate assess my databases to make sure that how ready my database is. So I talked about the Microsoft Data Migration Assistant tool. Right now it is a 5.0 release. This is a publicly available downloadable tool. You can download it from Microsoft website. And then you just install locally, which is a desktop tool. And then from there, you can start assessing your databases. So I have my DMA tool here that I'm going to showcase. So typically, here is the DMA tool is going to look like. At first, what you do is very simple, actually. You do want to do an assessment. You provide an assessment name here and choose what type of assessment you are doing. Are you assessing your database engine? Are you assessing your integration services? Choose the target type here, SQL Server or AWS RDS SQL Server as a source. And then as a target, my target is I want to see if I can migrate my database to Azure SQL Database Manager instance. That's my intent. So now I am going to test my database to see if I can achieve my intent or not, right? And then you just create a project, and then you provide your source information, connection parameters, and all the stuff, and you perform the assessment. When you perform the assessment, this is how the results are going to look like. The results are, there are two modes here. One is the feature parity, the other one is the compatibility issues. Compatibility issues is the DMA will scan through your entire database schema and find out if there are any objects in the schema. Either it could be a table, or it could be a view, or it could be a stored procedure, or it could be a trigger, to see if any of these objects are using some kind of legacy syntax that is not being supported. We call that as a breaking change. Breaking change is not necessarily a migration blocker. You can still be able to migrate, but this functionality might break when you start using it, right? That's what it is. And this feature parity is something we go beyond your databases. We look at the entire SQL Server instance as a whole, and then we look at some of the specific features used like agent jobs, SSAS packages, and see if those features are supported or not. Or cross-database reference queries, a famous example, right? To see if those features are supported or not, and if not supported, we'll tell you how to fix them. Sometimes, if there is too much effort is there, then you decide that I'm not migrating there, I'm going to choose another platform where those features are being supported. I have a customer who got 2,000 stored procedures used cross-database reference queries in every 2,000 procedures. I told them that you need to really re-architect or refactor these stored procedures using the elastic queries. Then they said, no, we can't invest that much. At that point, the SQL DB manager instance is not available. So they said, we are going to be migrating to SQL VM. At least they know, right? Through the DMA tool, they were able to know that I got 2,000 stored procedures that I need to fix it if I want to migrate to SQL DB. Whereas for now, I can migrate to SQL VM first so that I migrate to Azure, and then I will deal with those stored procedures at a later point of time. Luckily, we have manager instance now, which supports all these features so that you can do a lift and shift migration to manager instance itself. And then here, like I said, the very first thing that you need to look at is are there any migration blockers? In these categories, you should look for migration blockers. If there is a migration blocker, that means you cannot migrate to that particular platform. In this case, it is manager instance because of the file stream option here. File stream is not supported on the manager instance yet. Now, if you there are only two options for you. Either you refactor this feature or you migrate to SQL VM, right? But my specific database that I am talking about, the parts unlimited. That is the one that my application is using it. This shows very clean plate. I don't have any issues. It is ready to migrate to MI. And let me look at the SQL feature parity as well. And no issues there. That means my database is ready to migrate to manager instance. But I'm also going to show some databases have breaking changes. There is a difference between a migration blocker and a breaking change. Blocker, that means you cannot migrate. Breaking change, you can migrate, but you should fix it, right? And if you look at those migration breaking changes, for example, non-ANSI joins, these are all the very old joins. They don't work anymore with any of the latest SQL Server instances. And it is telling me that a specific stored procedure that is what it is using the non-ANSI joins, and we also tell you how to fix it. Not only that we assess your schema, but we assess your application layer as well. If the queries are directly coming from your data layer in the application, we have an ability to go to your application data layer and then find out how those queries are going to work or not, right? So we have a comprehensive assessment experience. So now at least I know that I can migrate my parts unlimited database to managed instance. The next question comes to my mind is, great that I can migrate MI, but I don't know what size it is going to be, right? Size means the SKU. MI has got several tiers and several SKUs, right? It has got general purpose, it has got business critical, and in each one of these tiers, there are multiple SKUs, multiple vCores. And I really want to decide which vCore that I want to go. How do I know? DMA provides an ability to assess your performance of your your on-premises application, and then it will match with the right SKU that you can really migrate to so that you will have an optimal performance experience, right? So when you install the DMA, it comes up with a PowerShell script. You can use that PowerShell script to, so we have this article called Identify the Right Azure SQL Database Managed Instance Queue. So you use this PowerShell script. PowerShell script is having some kind of a performance counters that we collect for your peak database workload, and then we provide that output to the DMA as an input so that the DMA can assess all that performance characteristics, your CPU usage, your memory usage, other heuristics like are you kind of using any in-memory tables. So it looks at all that data and then come up with the right SKU that you can go with it. So I can give you an example, a typical SKU that my DMA showed me here, which is this. So it is telling me that for my parts unlimited database, it is recommending me that I need to go with a general purpose 8 vCore. That is what it is recommending. Not only that, it is also telling me the monthly estimate, how much it is going to cost for me. And it also gives you an option, if I already have SQL Server licenses, hybrid licenses, then I'm going to get a discount out of those licenses, right? So that way, I know my size of the target. I also know how much it is going to monthly cost to me. So I got all that information now, right? So now I'm ready to migrate to Azure. And before I migrate to Azure, today specifically, I'm going to use the hybrid DMS experience. And I will tell you why we need hybrid DMS for the DMS means Azure Database Migration Service that I just talked about. So let me switch to my PowerPoint. 5, I guess. What is hybrid Azure Database Migration Service? So like I said, the cloud-based Azure Database Migration Service is released 2 years ago. What it requires is there is a requirement that you have to have a site-to-site connectivity between your on-premises network and as well as the Azure network for you to be able to leverage the cloud-based DMS service to do the migrations. And that is, while that is not an issue for several of the customers, but few customers have issues that they don't have a site-to-site connectivity. Usually site-to-site connectivity can be done using 3 different ways. One is express route, the site-to-site VPN connection, or point-to-site VPN connection, right? But some customers that they don't have that site-to-site connectivity yet, or they are in the process of establishing that, it will take some time. Or even though you have an express route connectivity exists, a particular DBA who is doing a POC migration, it's taking time to really convince their network team to enable the express network gateway for the specific VNet that he needs to do the POC, right? All this is becoming as a friction. Then we realize that we need to really give an easy solution for the customers that the DBAs do not require to really rely on the networking team. That's where the idea of hybrid DMS came. What hybrid DMS really means is that essentially you are bringing the Azure Database Migration Service worker, whatever that engine, the core engine which is doing the actual migration, you're bringing that to the on-premises. That's what it is. So you're bringing that solution to here, to on-premises. So you install the DMS worker in your on-premises network, which is close to your sources. At that point, treat this as any other application which is really connecting to your database. All the connection logistics, all the network protocols, everything that pretty easy to enable because you're simply already doing that because of other applications connecting to the database. So you're not really doing anything new, right? And when it comes to the cloud, we connect through a public endpoints. When it comes to the SQL DB, we use the public endpoint connectivity to the Azure target. When it comes to the managed instance, we use REST API calls to do the restore, right? That way, you don't have to have a site-to-site connectivity between your on-premises and cloud. But to manage the hybrid DMS, you still have a Azure Database Migration Service is created in the cloud, but that is only for the management purposes. So very lightweight service that you could create, which takes only a few seconds to provision, and then you use that for management purposes. That means when I say management purposes is, creating a migration project, running a migration, doing a migration cutover, all these are management operations. So you use that service to do the management operations, but most of the work is done by the hybrid DMS service, which is installed locally in your on-premises network. 3 different ways that you can interact with your hybrid DMS is through Azure portal, which I'm going to do today, but we are also going to provide support for PowerShell and as well as the REST APIs that you can use to automate, right? So now I'm going to do that. For that purposes, thanks man. For that purposes, what I did is I already created a hybrid service here. The name is Hybrid Rajpo. We have a complete end-to-end step-by-step guidance how to create this service, how to install the hybrid DMS worker on premises. All that information is there in our documentation. So for the interest of the time, some of those operations that I'm skipping at this point, right? So now I'm interacting with my hybrid DMS service through Azure portal itself. The status shows online. You don't see any virtual network here because there is no requirement of a virtual network anymore for the same purpose where I said like you are putting your worker on-prem. So I'm going to create my very first migration project here. And then I'm going to give a name, Ignite demo or something. And then my source is SQL Server. Like I said, we support several other sources. Today my source is a SQL Server, and I want to migrate to Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, and I want to do an online migration. That means I want to do a migration of database which minimizes my downtime. Okay. So I'm going to choose that option. Save and then create and run activity. For that, I need a notepad here because that is where my all my information is there. So I need a source SQL Server, which is this. And then we support all type of authentication, SQL authentication and as well as the Windows authentication. I'm going to use SQL here. And I'm going to connect to the, now the DMS will go and then try to connect with your on-premises SQL Server. And when the connection happens, the connection is not happening through the cloud. The connection happening through the hybrid DMS that I already installed in my on-premises network. Now I need to give application ID. How many people know about application ID? Yeah, so we use application ID as a means to be able to connect and interact with any other Azure resources that we need to interact for this migration experience. So for example, what we do as part of the online migration is we take your existing backups and then we use those backups to do the migration. So we use the full database backup at first. We restore that full database backup on the target, and then we look for the log backups. And as soon as we find log backups are available, we apply them, and we continuously doing that. So we use log backups mechanism to have a continuous sync between your on-premises database and the database which is on the managed instance, right? When you are ready to do the cutover, that's the time that you take your final backup and then provide to us, we use that for restore. So for that, we need to upload those backup files to the blob storage at first. So that's a Azure resource. Managed instance is also Azure resource. To connect to these and to interact with these services, we use the app ID, application ID. So I already created my application ID here that I'm going to use it. And the way that we authenticate the application ID is using the key. So this key also I generated. I'm going to provide that key here. And then at this point, I'm going to choose a subscription where my managed instance exists. And then I'm going to pick my managed instances here. And now you need to give a user ID and password for the managed instance to connect. So I have my user ID here. And then save. Again, in each of these blades, when we hit save, we do all kind of validations to make sure that you are able to connect to managed instance, make sure that you have right permissions to do it or not. So here you can select the specific set of databases that you want to migrate, or you can migrate all of them to perform a true lift and shift migration of your entire SQL Server instance. For the interest of the time here, I'm only interested in parts unlimited database for my application. So I'm going to select that one, save. And then I need to provide an SMB network share where I can read the backup files from your on-premises network. So DMS, remember DMS will not take the backups for online migrations. Instead, we leverage your backups. The reason why is a lot of customers have disaster recovery plan in place for their production environments. As part of that, they already take full backups and log backups. And if I start taking the log backups, I'm really disrupting that log chain. People who know about database backup and restore technologies in SQL Server, they can connect with me. You cannot really disrupt those log backups. They should follow a sequence. So that's the reason I don't want to into a business where I disrupt your backups. So instead, give us backups so that you provide those backups in that SMB network share. So I already got few backups that I taken, and now I'm going to provide that SMB network share here. And then provide a username that DMS can impersonate that username to read the backup files from that SMB network share so that I can upload to the blob storage. And then I need to pick up a subscription where you can really upload those backup files. Okay, so I can rename my database as well. I have a feeling that I already have this database there. So I can rename my target database if I want to. So this really happens with the multiple POCs when you're doing those POCs. So let me explain the screen actually. So what you are telling DMS service is that take my backups from the location of this SMB network share and then use this user ID and password and impersonate it and read the backup files from that location and upload those backup files to a blob storage that I'm providing to you and use that for restore. So is the data moving outside of your environment? The original files are sitting in your SMB network share and you are uploading to a blob storage in your own subscription. So the data will not move away from your environment. It will never go to Microsoft. It only stays with your own environment. Either it could be cloud or it could be on-prem. And then I'm going to hit save button. It's going to validate again to make sure that the SMB network share exists. It has right permissions to do all these activities that we just talked. It will do all those activities, and then you just hit run migration. And you just hit, right? So what will happen when you hit run migration means then you are establishing a migration between an on-prem database and a managed instance which is sitting in the cloud. At that point, your downtime is not started. Your downtime is not started because we only established a migration. That means we established a plan where restore your full database backup there, look for any log backups that are coming into that SMB network share so that you can keep restoring them. And when I say to you to do the cutover, that is the time that we are going to have a migration downtime. At this point, we are not doing the cutover yet. But I'm not going to hit run migration here because I already did. So I'm going to close all these windows. And I have a project here actually, which is running. So SQL to SQL MI, which I already established this migration sometime in October actually. Let me go back here, let me show you. So this particular migration is running since October 29th. That means I already established a migration project since then, and it is continuously running. See how stable the service is. So you can run these migrations for a long time until you become confident that yes, I can do the migration cutover. Then you click on that, look at the details here, migration is running right now. And then parts unlimited DB, the same DB. Look at that backup file. So full backup is already restored. There are a bunch of transaction log backups happened In the meanwhile, we uploaded them and they restored, and it keeps waiting for any log backups to show up. That's the status. So now what I'm going to be doing is, I'm going to go back to my the VM here. I don't need this one. I'm going to close this. No, I'm not going to close all tabs, just you. Okay, so this is still connected to my on-premises environment. So I can do some transactions here. I can order a shop now. Maybe I choose an oil here, $28, and then I'm going to add to the cart. I'm doing it all this in on-prem environment. So my downtime is not started yet. So I'm going to give Raj, and give some phone numbers. I want to save time here. That's why I'm just typing whatever that comes. Right, and then free. Everything is free nowadays. So I'm still doing these operations now. Now I'm ready to do the cutover. At this point, what should I do is, I stop all the incoming traffic that is coming into this application first. That is, DMS will not do that for you. You should do that, because we don't know how to stop your incoming traffic. We don't understand your application that much, right? So you stop all the incoming traffic and take the final log backup from the parts unlimited. So I already have a command here, backup log, parts unlimited, which is going to be a final 2, because I already did a final name there. And then I'm going to run that command. Yep, the command run through. Is it went to the right SMB network share? Hope so. Now I'm going to go back to my DMS here. I'm going to refresh. See, this file is just uploaded. So DMS continuously keeps track of the SMB network share, and then as soon as it finds the right backup that is coming in, it will just upload. If the backups comes from a different database that you are not migrating to, it will not touch that. It will exactly know which file that it is looking for. And then at this point, it will restore as well. So restore will take some time, obviously. Yeah, restore will take, I don't want to wait until that point. I pretend that the restore has happened. When the restore happens, you will see that information here, the timestamp, to what timestamp the restore has happened last time, so that you know to what timestamp that the source and target are in sync. And also it tells you which backup is restored at the end. So I'm going to pretend that I'm done. I restored, right? Then I can call a cutover button here. In the cutover, it's already done. Let me go back here. It's already restored actually, which is good. So now I'm ready to do the cutover here, and then confirm, apply. So at this point, we'll bring your target database online. That means your target database is ready. Now my application is not migrated yet. Now I need to do the application migration, right? My application is still sitting on-prem. Now I need to migrate my application, but these operations can be done in parallel. You don't have to wait for database to migrate. Okay, let's do the application migration now. Database migration is done, the cutover will happen. I'm not too much worried about that. But let's talk about application migration. So for the application migration, my current application is currently running on ASP.NET. There are two aspects. One is that I need to assess the application to see if this application is ready to migrate to Azure Web Apps, which is a service on the Azure App Service. That means essentially a service for your web service, right? I want to validate that. How do I validate? Here is the link. There is a public portal that is available. You can give a publicly available link to that, and it will really go and then do that kind of assessment for you. So I have a notepad here, which is my, Parts Unlimited is my, any public URL that you can give it there, but let's give a Parts Unlimited URL there, and then just assess it. It will tell you the specific frameworks that the application is currently using, whether those frameworks are supported or not. Either it could be PHP or 2011 or any other type of frameworks that it will detect it, and it will tell you whether this framework is ready to migrate to Azure Web Apps or not. It also tells you the platform on which the web service is being hosted, and also what specific web services that the application is using. Right now it is saying Apache, right? So it will tell you if it is IIS, it will tell you that. So you would know exactly the frameworks, the web services, whether these components are ready to migrate to Azure Web App Services or not. You can even click on to this setting here so that it will go even deep into some of those components that you really need to know whether that is being supported or not. So at this point, I don't really see any issues with that. So I'm ready to migrate. For migrating my app, after I'm done with my assessment, I can use the Azure Migration App tool that is also publicly available. You can download publicly, but you got to install that on your web service. So whichever the server that is hosting your web service, that's where you are going to be installing this Azure Migration App application. So you just simply download from download website provided here, you just download it, right? So now I'm going to go back to my server where I'm hosting the web service, and then I already installed that app, and this app already detected there are two web services which are running. One is the default web service, and the other one is Parts Unlimited, which is us. So I'm going to choose that one, and then I go to the next step. Here now it is assessing the application again. It is telling there are different warnings here. Warnings are not migration blockers. It is just that, especially I can talk about this connection string. There are multiple ways that you can change a connection string, or you can configure a connection string on the Azure Web App Services. One is through web.config file, which is a legacy way of doing it, which is also supported. But also there is a new configuration section in the web apps, which I'm going to show. There also you can configure your connection string. But if you want to perform a true lift and shift migration and you don't want to make significant changes to your app, you can continue to use that web config. So that is what the warning is meant for. But other than that, I don't really see any errors. So let's go to the next step. And this is where you need to log into the Azure portal, right? Because you are migrating to Azure, this application. So you need to copy the code here, log into the, it might call me because I'm logging into portal. Let's see. Yep, I'm going to use my account. I have already signed. That's good. Now you pick a subscription where you want to host your application. So I'm going to pick my application here. And then resource group. Either you can keep it an existing resource group, or you can create a new resource group. All the resources that are required for this web app will be created in that particular resource. So I'm going to use existing one. Now it is populating all the existing ones that I have. So I'm going to choose one of those. And then it is also talking about the specific region. Mine is South Central. Okay, that's fine. For now, I just go into Central US. And then I'm going to skip the data. There are two ways that you can migrate the databases in the app itself. Whether you can say that I'm going to use Azure Database Migration Service to migrate my database, which we did, right? Or you can say that I'm going to use hybrid connection, which means is that I will migrate my application to Azure, but my database is going to still sit in on-prem, so that I can have a hybrid connection between my app and my databases, right? Or you can say that I'm going to migrate both. Usually for production migrations, we strongly recommend that you migrate both app and as well as your databases to Azure. Otherwise, you might have a network latencies, right? So I'm going to skip the database migration part because I use the DMS to do that. And then the next one is you got to give the name of the application that you want to migrate. So Parts Unlimited _ ignite or something. What happened? Do too many characters or okay? And then you just hit migrate. That's it. It's very simple. You pick your subscription where you want to migrate. You pick the region where you want to put your service, and you tell whether you want to migrate the database in terms of the hybrid connection, or whether you are going to be using it a separate service, which we did a DMS to do the migration, and it will migrate your app. I'm going to hit migrate app. It will take some time. It's doing the validation step, creating step 2 and step 3. It just takes only 5 minutes in my experiment. So I already migrated an app for us. So let me go back to the portal, Azure portal here. So I got 3 different apps that I migrated in different time frames. And this the next step is once the app is migrated, next step is you need to change the connection string because the connection string still points to the database which is sitting in the cloud. I'm sorry, which is sitting in the on-prem, right? For that, you need to change the connection string. For the connection string change, I'm going to type edit, and in the preview, you will have a web config file, and there you change your connection string, which I already did. So I'm going to skip that part as well. Yeah, let me skip that as well. So now let me open this Parts Unlimited application here, which is running fully on the Azure, which is connecting to a managed instance. Now what I'm going to be doing is simply I'm going to be accessing this application here, which is running completely on the web. Yep, right away came. So that's how you can use these tools to have an end-to-end migration from your on-premises environment using applications and as well as the databases. I know we use a bunch of tools here. We use a DMA tool to do the assessment of the databases. We use Azure Database Migration Service to migrate the databases. We use some kind of a portal experience to assess your application, whether it is ready or not, and then use the app migration assistant tool to do the migration, right? I know right now it is a disconnected experience, but we are also working on streamlining all these experiences to have a seamless flow throughout the journey. To connect that gap right now, I wrote an article recently, an end-to-end process for lift and shifting your applications to Azure, which explains exactly the story that I just mentioned. We went through all this experience, which I documented as a blog. So I strongly recommend that you go through the blog so that you can really migrate your apps and as well as database to get the end-to-end migration experience. Make sense? So that concludes my demos, and then I'm going to switch to my presentation to do the conclusion. There is 5 here. Can you help me? Sounds good. Okay. So that's what hybrid DMS we talked about, and then this is like it explains how the online migration works with the managed instance. Without the slide I explained. Basically, you provide the backups to SMB network share. We upload to the blob storage. From there, we keep restoring it until you say that you're ready to the cutover. In the case of hybrid DMS service, we will bring the worker into the on-premises itself. That's the only difference. Now, to help, there are multiple ways that the Microsoft really helps in terms of enabling your migrations. There are programs called Azure Migration Program. Which there is a public link that you can really go on and nominate yourself, so that we will really look at your entire migration scope in terms of number of VMs and as well as the number of databases that you are planning to migrate. At that point, once the nomination gets accepted, we'll really provide help in multiple facets. Like we will provide you a fundamental Azure training to make sure that you have the level set of skills to begin with. We provide intermediate skill sets for the Azure. We also look at your existing environments, provide an architectural view how that entire architecture is going to look like to migrate to Azure. Will really help you to find out whether it is a true lift and shift migration, whether do you need to do a refactor or do you need to do a re-engineering, that kind of stuff. And also we really help you to do the assessments and as well as the POC migrations for you. So it's a very comprehensive program that go ahead and aka.com/AMP. Azure Migrate program, so that you can really nominate yourself, so that we can really provide much more deeper help, engineering white glove experience to you guys to assess and as well as migrate your databases. This is all to really accelerate your cloud journey. And then this is the roadmap. So what is currently available and then what is really coming soon. Today we released the Azure Database DMS hybrid mode. And we're also going to pretty soon release the Postgres SQL migration for hyperscale migrations. That is also coming pretty soon. And then these are the various links that you might want to take a picture here. Very simple links that you can really get a lot of help from references from these links, and then really understand your migration journey and then leverage these resources. With that, this is the last session. Obviously, we don't have any more sessions left. So thank you so much for your time. And Please take some time to submit your evaluations as well, because we really give a lot of importance for them, for the feedback, so that we can use that feedback to improve our product quality and as well as the presentation content to bring value for your time. Thank you so much time again, and have safe travels. Thank you.